Top 10, Route 666. Haunted highways you'll never want to drive. You may be wondering what I have to say concerning certain roads in America today. Well, stay tuned for something important. Highways, endless stretches of road connecting cities, states, and stories. They're symbols of freedom, adventure, and discovery. But some highways hold secrets, their pavement echoing with the tragedies of the past and the whispers of those who never reached their destination. Tonight, we're stepping into the shadows of the most haunted highways in America. From phantom vehicles to spectral hitchhikers, and desolate roads where the air itself feels alive. These stories are as real as the fear they inspire. Please mention the state you are watching from, and if you've used any of these roads before, let us know in the comments section. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay with me as we explore 10 highways you'll never want to drive at night. Each mile carries a story, and each story will take you closer to the edge of what you thought was real. And if you think these roads are empty, think again. Road 1, New Mexico, Route 666. The Devil's Highway. Let's begin with a highway that's infamous for its name alone. Route 666, nicknamed the Devil's Highway, once spanned the rugged landscapes of New Mexico and the surrounding states. For decades, it was a lifeline for travelers braving the unforgiving desert. But this highway carried more than just cars and trucks. It carried a curse. Accidents, disappearances, and encounters with the unexplainable have earned this road a reputation that lingers long after its name was changed. The stories date back to the highway's earliest days, when it was a lonely, isolated route cutting through the desert. Travelers spoke of seeing strange lights in the distance, lights that didn't belong to any vehicle. These lights would appear suddenly, hovering over the road, and vanish just as quickly. Some described them as orbs of fire, while others swore they looked like headlights, until they realized there was no car behind them. One of the most terrifying legends is that of the flaming semi. Witnesses describe a massive truck, engulfed in flames, barreling down the highway at impossible speeds. The truck appears without warning, its engine roaring like thunder, and it chases drivers relentlessly. Those who've survived encounters with the flaming semi tell eerily similar stories. Their cars stalling as the truck approached, the searing heat of the flames even with their windows closed, and the feeling of being hunted. The truck never collides with its victims. It simply disappears moments before impact, leaving the smell of burning rubber and the echo of its engine in its wake. But the flaming semi is not the only entity haunting Route 666. Drivers have reported seeing shadowy figures standing along the roadside, their forms barely distinguishable in the moonlight. Some of these figures wave as if asking for help, only to vanish when approached. Others remain still, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. One trucker, driving late at night, claimed he saw a figure step directly into his path. He swerved to avoid it, but when he stopped to check, there was no one there. Only a single handprint scorched into the hood of his truck. Perhaps the most chilling tales come from those who have encountered the hounds of hell. These spectral dogs with glowing red eyes and snarling teeth are said to stalk the highway at night, chasing cars and scratching at their doors. One woman, driving alone, reported hearing growling outside her car as she sped down the highway. When she glanced in her rearview mirror, she saw several dark shapes running alongside her car, keeping pace even as she hit 80 miles an hour. When she reached the safety of a nearby gas station, the scratches on her car door told her it wasn't just her imagination. Locals believe Route 666's dark reputation stems from the land it was built on. Some say the highway cuts through territory that was once sacred, a place where ancient rituals were performed and spirits were called. Others point to the highway's tragic history: countless accidents, many fatal, and an unsettling number of disappearances. The road's eerie energy seems to seep into the minds of those who drive it, with reports of hallucinations, overwhelming feelings of dread, and a sense that something unseen is always watching. In 2003, the highway was renamed US Route 491 in an attempt to distance it from its infamous moniker. But a name change wasn't enough to erase its past. The hauntings persist, as do the warnings from those who've experienced them firsthand. If you ever find yourself driving through the desolate stretches of this road, remember this: the Devil's Highway earned its name for a reason. And sometimes, the scariest part of the journey isn't what's ahead. It's what's already behind you. Road to California, the Phantom of Highway 17. Nestled between the mountains of Santa Cruz and Silicon Valley is Highway 17, a twisting, turning stretch of road known for its breathtaking views and treacherous curves. But for those who know its history, this highway carries a far darker reputation. Accidents are so frequent that locals have nicknamed it the Killer Highway, and among the tales of wrecks and tragedies, one story rises above the rest: the legend of the Phantom of Highway 17. The first accounts of the Phantom began in the 1940s, when drivers reported seeing a woman in white walking along the side of the road. She's always described the same way: a young woman with long dark hair, wearing a flowing gown. She often appears barefoot, her face pale and expressionless. The Phantom's presence is unsettling enough, but what happens next has terrified generations of travelers. Those who stop to offer her a ride say she climbs into the back seat silently, her head bowed. When they ask her where she's headed, she gives vague directions, usually pointing further up the mountain. But as the car approaches one of Highway 17's infamous sharp turns, she vanishes, leaving nothing behind but a faint chill in the air and the sound of her voice, whispering, "Thank you." One of the most detailed encounters comes from a truck driver in the 1970s. Driving late at night, he spotted the woman standing near a curve. Concerned for her safety, he pulled over and offered her a ride. She climbed into the passenger seat without a word, her gaze fixed straight ahead. As they drove, he tried to make conversation, but she didn't respond. When they reached the summit, she turned to him, her eyes hollow and lifeless, and said, "This is where I died." Before he could react, she was gone, leaving only the faint imprint of her hand on the fogged-up window. Over the years, countless others have claimed to encounter the Phantom, and her appearance is often a prelude to disaster. Drivers who see her are struck by an overwhelming sense of unease, followed by mechanical failures, brakes giving out, engines stalling, headlights flickering. Many of these incidents occur near the same curve where the Phantom is said to have died, the site of a tragic accident decades ago. The details of her death vary with each retelling, but most agree that she was a bride-to-be on her way to her wedding when her car lost control and plunged into the ravine below. The Phantom isn't the only unexplained presence on Highway 17. Late at night, drivers have reported seeing shadowy figures darting across the road, only to disappear into thin air. Some describe hearing faint laughter or sobbing through their open windows. Others speak of headlights that appear in their rearview mirrors, following closely before vanishing without a trace. One chilling account involves a group of college students returning to Santa Cruz after a late-night concert. As they navigated the winding road, they noticed a pair of headlights tailing them aggressively. The lights moved closer and closer, as if trying to force them off the road. When they reached a straight stretch and tried to speed away, the lights suddenly swerved off the road and disappeared. When they stopped to check, there was no sign of a car, no tire marks. Nothing but the unsettling realization that whatever had been following them wasn't bound by the rules of the living. Highway 17's reputation has only grown over time, with paranormal investigators and thrill seekers flocking to its curves, hoping to catch a glimpse of the Phantom. But for those who've experienced her presence firsthand, there's no thrill, only fear. The Phantom of Highway 17 is a reminder that the past doesn't always stay behind us. Sometimes, it follows us, waiting for the right moment to make itself known. So if you ever find yourself driving along Highway 17 late at night, keep your eyes on the road. And if you see a woman in white standing in the darkness, think carefully before you stop. because some passengers never truly leave. Road 3, Texas, the Ghost Riders of Bragg Road. In the heart of East Texas lies a stretch of road so quiet, so remote, it feels like it's been forgotten by time. Bragg Road, also known as the Ghost Road, is an 8-mile stretch cutting through the dense forests of the Big Thicket. By day, it's a serene path lined with towering pines and oaks. But when night falls, the road takes on an entirely different persona. For generations, locals have spoken of strange lights that appear along its length. Unexplainable orbs that hover, drift, and follow anyone brave enough to travel its path. The stories of Bragg Road date back to the late 19th century, when the area was home to a thriving railroad that transported timber from the Big Thicket to nearby towns. According to legend, a train conductor working the line met a grisly end when he was decapitated in a tragic accident. Ever since, his ghost is said to haunt the road, searching for his lost head. Witnesses describe seeing a glowing light in the distance, swaying side to side like a lantern, as if the spirit is retracing the tracks that once ran through the area. The phenomenon, known as the Bragg Light, has been witnessed countless times. Drivers report seeing the light appear suddenly in their rearview mirrors, growing brighter as it approaches. Some say it passes right through their vehicles before vanishing. Others describe how the light seems to play tricks, appearing just ahead of them, drawing them deeper into the road's shadowy expanse. No matter how far or fast they drive, the light remains at a constant distance, always there, always watching. One of the most unsettling encounters occurred in the 1970s, when a group of high school friends decided to explore the road late at night. Armed with flashlights and a single car, they ventured down Bragg Road, joking and laughing to mask their growing unease. Halfway down the road, they spotted the light, a faint, golden glow in the distance. At first, they thought it was another car, but as they drew closer, they realized there was no vehicle. The light began to sway, moving toward them at an unnatural speed. Panicked, they piled into the car and tried to escape, but the light followed them all the way to the main road before disappearing. But the Bragg Light isn't the only thing that haunts this road. Some speak of a phantom stagecoach, its ghostly wheels creaking along the dirt path. According to legend, the coach belonged to a wealthy landowner who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. His spirit is said to ride the road at night, the sound of hoofbeats echoing through the stillness. Those who have encountered the stagecoach describe hearing the sound long before they see it, a rhythmic clattering that seems to come from nowhere. When it finally appears, it's accompanied by an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the very air has grown heavier. There are also whispers of shadowy figures moving among the trees, their forms barely visible against the darkness. One hiker, exploring the area alone, reported seeing a man standing in the middle of the road, holding what appeared to be a lantern. When the hiker called out, the figure turned and walked into the woods, the light flickering and fading with each step. But when the hiker followed, there were no footprints, only the unsettling realization that he had been utterly alone. Bragg Road has attracted skeptics and paranormal investigators alike, all eager to explain the mysteries of the Ghost Road. Some attribute the lights to swamp gas or car headlights refracted through the trees. But these scientific theories do little to dispel the fear felt by those who've seen the lights up close. There's a difference, they say, between natural phenomena and something that feels alive. For locals, Bragg Road is both a source of pride and a place of caution. It's a reminder of the area's rich history and the enduring mysteries that refuse to be solved. So if you ever find yourself driving through the Big Thicket and see a glowing light in the distance, think twice before chasing it. Because on Bragg Road, what you're following might not be leading you back to safety. Road 4, Pennsylvania, the haunted Turnpike Tunnels. In Pennsylvania, a stretch of road lies hidden in plain sight, abandoned, forgotten, and hauntingly silent. The Pennsylvania Turnpike Tunnels were once part of a bustling highway system, cutting through the rugged Allegheny Mountains. But when modern engineering rendered these tunnels obsolete, they were left to decay, their echoing chambers swallowed by darkness. Today, the tunnels stand as relics of a bygone era, but they are far from empty. Stories of ghostly encounters and unexplainable events have turned them into one of the state's most chilling paranormal hotspots. The turnpike was first constructed in the 1940s, a marvel of its time. Thousands of workers toiled day and night to carve tunnels through the mountains, but the job came with a cost. Accidents were frequent, and the lives lost during construction are said to have left a permanent mark on the land. By the 1960s, advancements in road design rendered parts of the turnpike unnecessary, and the tunnels were sealed off, at least to cars. But for those who venture inside, the past feels very much alive. Visitors to the Sidling Hill Tunnel, one of the longest and most infamous, report an overwhelming sense of unease as they approach its gaping mouth. The air grows colder, the shadows deeper, and the once inviting forest surrounding the tunnel takes on a menacing edge. Step inside, and the silence is deafening, broken only by the occasional drip of water echoing off the walls. It's in this silence that many have heard the unexplainable. Footsteps in the darkness, faint whispers that seem to come from just behind them, and, most chillingly, the sound of distant screams reverberating through the tunnel's black expanse. One of the most well-known legends tied to the turnpike is that of the miner. During construction, a cave-in trapped a worker deep within the mountain. By the time rescuers reached him, it was too late. Today, his spirit is said to wander the tunnels, appearing as a figure in dusty miner's clothing. Witnesses describe seeing his lantern bobbing in the darkness, only to have it vanish as they approach. Some claim to feel a hand on their shoulder, cold and heavy, followed by a voice warning them to leave. In the Rays Hill Tunnel, another notorious section, ghostly phenomena are even more intense. Paranormal investigators have captured thermal images of shadowy figures moving through the tunnels, and audio recordings have picked up faint voices calling out names. One hiker, exploring the area alone, reported hearing the sound of a car engine revving behind him. When he turned, he saw headlights speeding toward him, only for the lights to disappear before reaching him. His only evidence? A deep tire mark in the dirt that led nowhere. But the strangest stories involve a ghostly train said to run through the turnpike. According to legend, this spectral locomotive appears late at night, its whistle echoing through the tunnels. Witnesses have described seeing the faint outline of a train, its windows glowing with an otherworldly light. One man, camping near the Sidling Hill Tunnel, claimed he was awoken by the sound of a train barreling through the tunnel. But when he rushed to see it, there was nothing but silence and the lingering smell of coal smoke. Skeptics often attribute these experiences to the tunnel's natural acoustics, the play of light and shadow, or the power of suggestion. But those who've stood in the cold darkness of the turnpike know better. The air inside feels heavy, charged with something that defies explanation. It's as if the tunnels themselves remember the tragedies that shaped them, their echoing halls replaying fragments of the past. The Pennsylvania Turnpike Tunnels may no longer guide travelers to their destinations, but they remain far from forgotten. For those who dare to enter, they offer a different kind of journey, a step into the unknown, where the only certainty is that you won't leave the same. So if you ever find yourself walking through these abandoned tunnels, remember this: the past is closer than you think, and sometimes it's still waiting for you in the dark. Road 5, Nevada, the eerie loneliness of Highway 50. In the heart of Nevada stretches a highway so remote, so desolate, that it has earned the title, the loneliest road in America. Highway 50 winds through barren desert landscapes, abandoned towns, and open expanses that seem to stretch endlessly into the horizon. For some, it's a road that symbolizes freedom. For others, it's a place where the silence is too loud and the shadows too long. But those who've driven it at night know there's something more unsettling about this highway, something that cannot be explained. The legend of Highway 50 begins with its ghost towns, remnants of Nevada's mining boom in the 19th century. Once thriving settlements, these towns now sit in ruins, their decaying buildings silent witnesses to the passage of time. But many believe these places aren't as empty as they seem. Travelers report seeing lights flickering in the windows of abandoned homes and hearing voices drifting through the air. Laughter, murmurs, and even the occasional cry for help. One of the most chilling tales comes from a photographer named Allison, who set out to capture images of the ghost towns along Highway 50. She arrived in the small, abandoned town of Middlegate at sunset, her camera ready to document the eerie beauty of the crumbling structures. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she heard the faint sound of a piano playing from what had once been the town saloon. Intrigued, she followed the sound, only to find the building empty. The piano, covered in years of dust, was completely silent. When she reviewed her recordings later, the sound of the piano was clear, and so was the faint, ghostly hum of a woman singing along. But the ghost towns aren't the only haunted aspect of Highway 50. The road itself seems to hold a presence, a feeling of being watched that many drivers have described. Late at night, shadowy figures are said to dart across the highway, vanishing before cars can swerve to avoid them. Some travelers report headlights appearing in their rearview mirrors, only to have the pursuing car vanish without a trace. One particularly unnerving phenomenon is the sound of footsteps echoing on the pavement when no one is around. In 2016, a couple traveling cross-country decided to pull over at a rest stop along the highway. As they sat in their car, they heard the distinct sound of boots walking toward them. Thinking it was a passerby, they looked around but saw no one. The footsteps stopped near the passenger side door, followed by a faint tap on the window. When they sped away, they noticed handprints on the dusty rear windshield that hadn't been there before. Perhaps the most famous legend tied to Highway 50 is that of the Phantom Hitchhiker. Countless drivers have reported seeing a man standing by the roadside, his face obscured by the shadows. When they stop to offer a ride, he climbs into the car, silent except for giving vague directions further down the road. But at some point during the drive, he vanishes, leaving only the faint smell of dust and sagebrush behind. Locals believe that the highway's eerie reputation is tied to the land itself. The desert is vast and ancient, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead feels thin. Native American tribes once called this area a land of whispers, a place where spirits roam freely. Many believe that the road's construction disturbed something best left undisturbed, awakening forces that now haunt its length. Highway 50's remoteness amplifies its fear factor. Cell phone service is sparse, and help is often miles away. The endless stretch of asphalt, flanked by nothing but sand and scrub, creates a sense of isolation that can fray even the steeliest nerves. For some, that isolation becomes too much. There are stories of drivers who stopped in the middle of the highway, overwhelmed by the silence, only to vanish without a trace. Their cars are later found empty, keys still in the ignition, as if they stepped out and walked into the desert, never to return. For those who dare to drive Highway 50, the warnings are clear. Don't stop, don't travel alone, and whatever you do, don't look back. Because on the loneliest road in America, you may not be as alone as you think. Road 6, Florida, the haunted I-4 dead zone. Deep in the heart of Central Florida, beneath the rush of cars and the hum of tires on asphalt, lies a stretch of road with a history as murky as the swamps surrounding it. Interstate 4, or I-4, is one of the busiest highways in the state, connecting Daytona Beach to Tampa. But near Sanford, there's a section of the highway that drivers dread, a quarter-mile stretch known as the I-4 dead zone. For decades, this part of the interstate has been plagued by accidents, unexplained phenomena, and a legend that refuses to die. The origins of the dead zone trace back to the 19th century, when this area was little more than a swampy wilderness. In 1887, a small group of German immigrants settled here, establishing a modest Catholic colony. Tragedy struck quickly. An outbreak of yellow fever swept through the community, killing several members, including 4 members of one family. With limited resources and no nearby cemetery, the victims were buried in an unmarked grave near the colony. Shortly after, the settlement was abandoned, and the land fell silent, until construction began on I for nearly a century later. In the 1950s, when crews were laying the foundations for the highway, they stumbled upon the graves. The discovery was unsettling, but rather than relocating the remains, the decision was made to pave over them. Locals warned against it, claiming the land was cursed, but the warnings went unheeded. It wasn't long before the dead zone earned its name. The first reported incidents came from the construction workers themselves. Equipment would malfunction inexplicably, and workers claimed to hear faint whispers in the wind. One foreman reported seeing shadowy figures moving through the swamp late at night, their forms fading into the mist as he approached. He later refused to work on the site after witnessing a phantom light hovering above the graves. Once the highway was completed, the accidents began. This short stretch of road has seen a disproportionate number of crashes, many of them fatal. Drivers describe losing control of their vehicles for no apparent reason, as though an unseen force were pulling them off the road. Others report seeing shadowy figures standing in the middle of the highway, forcing them to swerve. These figures vanish the moment the car leaves the pavement, leaving behind only the driver's shaken testimony. One of the most infamous incidents occurred in the 1970s, when a truck driver reported picking up a hitchhiker near the dead zone. The man was quiet, giving vague directions to a nearby town. But as they passed over the section of highway that runs above the graves, the hitchhiker turned to the driver and said they shouldn't have disturbed them. Before the driver could respond, the man vanished, leaving the passenger seat icy cold. Another chilling account comes from a family traveling to Disney World in the 1980s. As they drove through the dead zone, their radio began to emit static. Amid the static, they heard faint voices, speaking in a language they didn't recognize. The static grew louder, drowning out the voices, and then abruptly stopped. When they looked at their GPS, they realized they had been driving in circles, despite following the highway's straight path. The dead zone isn't limited to ghostly encounters. Electronics frequently malfunction in this area. Cell phones lose signal, car radios tune to stations that don't exist, and headlights flicker without explanation. Some drivers report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, as though they're being watched. Paranormal investigators who've studied the area claim to have recorded disembodied voices near the site of the graves, some pleading for help, others warning visitors to leave. Locals believe the dead zone's activity is tied directly to the disturbed graves, a curse born of disrespect and neglect. They speak of a recurring dream shared by many who live nearby. A group of figures, their faces obscured, standing on the edge of the swamp, watching the highway with silent, mournful eyes. For travelers on I-4, the dead zone is a stretch of road to be crossed quickly and without hesitation. The land remembers, they say, and it doesn't forgive easily. If you ever find yourself driving through this part of Florida, keep your eyes on the road and your hands on the wheel. And whatever you do, don't stop. Because here, the past isn't just a memory. It's still very much alive. Road 7, West Virginia, the tragic haunting of Route 60. In the winding Appalachian Hills of West Virginia, Route 60 carves its way through dense forests, quiet valleys, and small towns where the past feels impossibly close. But for all its beauty, this highway is also a place of tragedy. The stories tied to Route 60 are steeped in loss, of lives cut short and spirits that refuse to leave. To locals, it's more than just a road. It's a place where the veil between the living and the dead feels perilously thin. One of the most enduring legends involves the tragic accident of a school bus that slid off the road during a winter storm in the 1940s. The bus, carrying a group of children and their driver, plunged into a ravine, claiming the lives of nearly everyone on board. Rescue efforts were hindered by the icy conditions, and the wreckage wasn't found until the following day. To this day, the site of the crash remains a somber reminder of that terrible night. But for those who travel Route 60, the story doesn't end there. Drivers report seeing the apparitions of children standing by the roadside near the crash site, their small figures barely visible in the faint glow of headlights. Some claim the children wave as if asking for help, only to vanish before their eyes. Others describe hearing faint laughter or the sound of children singing, carried on the wind. One truck driver, passing through late at night, swore he saw a young girl in a tattered dress standing on the shoulder of the road. When he stopped to check if she needed help, she turned to him with hollow, tear-filled eyes before disappearing into the darkness. The ghostly children aren't the only spirits said to haunt Route 60. A phantom school bus has been spotted by countless travelers over the years. Witnesses describe seeing its headlights appear suddenly in their rearview mirrors, drawing closer at an alarming speed. But when they pull over to let it pass, the bus vanishes without a trace. One man, driving home after a late shift, claimed to see the bus stopped at the edge of the road, its interior lights flickering. He watched as shadowy figures moved inside, their shapes indistinct but unmistakably human. When he blinked, the bus was gone, leaving only tire tracks on the pavement. Perhaps the most chilling encounters involve the sound of the crash itself. Visitors to the area report hearing the screech of tires and the horrifying crunch of metal, followed by an eerie silence. Paranormal investigators who visited the site have captured audio recordings of these sounds, as well as faint voices calling out for help. One investigator claimed to feel an icy hand grab her arm while she was examining the ravine, leaving behind a bruise shaped like small fingers. Route 60's haunted reputation extends beyond the school bus tragedy. Locals speak of a spectral woman in black who appears near the Kanawha River, walking along the road with her head bowed. According to legend, she's searching for her husband, who drowned in the river decades ago. Drivers who've encountered her describe feeling an overwhelming sadness as they pass, followed by the inexplicable urge to stop and look for her. But those who do often find themselves alone, with no sign of the woman or anyone else. What makes Route 60 so uniquely unsettling is the sheer variety of its hauntings. From ghostly children to phantom vehicles, each mile seems to carry its own story, its own weight. Skeptics might dismiss these tales as folklore or coincidence, but for those who've experienced them, the road's energy is undeniable. There's a heaviness in the air, a feeling that the past is never far away. So if you ever find yourself driving along Route 60, be prepared. You might see the glow of headlights behind you, or the faint outline of a figure standing in the road ahead. And if you do, remember this: not everything you see on Route 60 is of this world. Road 8, Colorado, the Phantom Canyon Road. Nestled in the rugged mountains of Colorado, Phantom Canyon Road stretches between Florence and Cripple Creek, tracing a route once traversed by miners seeking their fortunes. This scenic byway, winding through narrow canyons and over wooden bridges, is celebrated for its breathtaking views and rich history. But beneath its beauty lies a darker tale. Phantom Canyon Road is said to be haunted by the echoes of its past, a place where tragedy and death have left an indelible mark. The road gets its name not just from the ghostly stories tied to it, but also from the eerie quiet that seems to envelop travelers. The sound of tires crunching on gravel is often the only thing breaking the silence, though some say that silence can be deceiving. As the name suggests, this is a road where the unexpected can appear at any turn, often in the form of something you can't explain. One of the most enduring legends is that of the ghostly stagecoach. During the late 1800s, Phantom Canyon Road was a bustling route for stagecoaches carrying miners, supplies, and sometimes gold. According to the story, one stagecoach met a grim fate when its driver lost control on a treacherous curve. The coach plunged into the canyon below, killing everyone on board. Since then, many have reported seeing the ghostly outline of a stagecoach traveling the road at night. Witnesses describe hearing the sound of hooves and creaking wheels before the apparition comes into view, its translucent form glowing faintly in the moonlight. The stagecoach always disappears at the same spot, just before the curve where it fell. Drivers on Phantom Canyon Road often speak of another chilling encounter, a shadowy figure that appears out of nowhere, walking along the side of the road. Some believe this is the spirit of a miner who died in a tunnel collapse nearby. The figure is said to wear old-fashioned work clothes, his features obscured by shadow. Travelers who've passed him claim he raises a hand as if signaling for them to stop. But when they slow down, the figure vanishes into the darkness. One of the most unsettling tales involves a pair of hikers who ventured into the canyon late one afternoon. As they explored the area near an abandoned mine, they heard the faint sound of a pickaxe striking rock. Thinking they'd stumbled upon another hiker, they called out, but no one responded. The sound continued, rhythmic and relentless, leading them deeper into the canyon. When they finally turned back toward the road, they saw a light bobbing in the distance, like an old miner's lantern. It followed them all the way to their car, disappearing just as they reached safety. Another phenomenon reported along the road is the sudden appearance of spectral lights, often described as faint orbs that drift through the canyon. These lights are said to lead travelers off the main path, luring them toward the cliffs or into the dense forest. Locals warn against following these lights, believing them to be the spirits of those who died in the canyon, seeking company in their eternal wandering. Phantom Canyon Road isn't just haunted by ghosts, it's haunted by its history. The mines that once brought prosperity to the area also brought danger and death. Accidents, cave-ins, and violence were common, and many of those who perished are said to linger still. The road itself seems to carry the weight of this past, with its narrow passages and sharp turns evoking a sense of unease even in broad daylight. For those brave enough to travel Phantom Canyon Road, the advice is simple. Drive carefully, keep your eyes on the road, and don't stop for what you can't explain. Because in the shadowy depths of this canyon, the past is never far away, and sometimes it's closer than you think. Road 9, Arizona, the curse of Route 89. Stretching through the sun-scorched deserts and rugged terrain of Arizona, Route 89 is a highway steeped in history and mystery. It winds past ancient landmarks, isolated towns, and wide stretches of barren wilderness. But beneath its scenic beauty lies a shadowy past, one tied to whispers of curses, restless spirits, and a highway that seems intent on collecting its own toll. Route 89's reputation as a cursed road is deeply tied to its proximity to Native American burial grounds and sacred sites. For centuries, the land around the highway was held in reverence by the tribes who lived there. When modern development encroached, stories of disturbances began to emerge. Construction crews reported unexplainable equipment malfunctions, sudden dust storms that halted progress, and strange noises echoing across the empty desert. The hauntings of Route 89 are as varied as the land it crosses. Travelers report seeing the ghostly apparitions of Native American warriors on horseback, their spectral forms galloping alongside cars before disappearing into the desert sands. Some describe hearing war cries carried on the wind, rising and falling like a distant echo. One driver, traveling late at night, claimed he saw a lone figure standing in the middle of the road. As he slowed to avoid hitting them, the figure turned, revealing hollow, glowing eyes before vanishing into thin air. Perhaps the most infamous legend tied to Route 89 is that of the cursed traveler. According to the story, the curse begins with an innocent-looking hitchhiker, a man dressed in old-fashioned clothes, carrying a small satchel. Drivers who pick him up report a strange, oppressive silence as he sits in the back seat, his face obscured by shadows. At some point during the ride, he'll speak, always in a soft, measured tone, asking the driver if they believe in fate. The moment the driver responds, the hitchhiker disappears, leaving behind the faint smell of earth and sage. Soon after, The driver often experiences a string of misfortunes: mechanical breakdowns, near accidents, or unsettling dreams of the man standing at the roadside once more. Route 89 is also known for its mysterious orbs of light, which locals refer to as desert spirits. These glowing spheres appear without warning, drifting across the road or hovering over nearby mesas. Some believe the lights are the spirits of the land itself, while others think they're tied to the burial grounds the road crosses. Drivers who followed the lights often find themselves lost, their GPS devices malfunctioning as if the road itself is shifting. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a couple who pulled over on Route 89 after their car overheated. As they waited for the engine to cool, they noticed movement in the distance. A group of shadowy figures slowly advancing toward them across the desert. At first, they thought it was a mirage, but as the figures drew closer, they realized they weren't human. Their limbs moved unnaturally, and their faces were featureless, like darkened masks. Terrified, the couple locked themselves in their car, but the figures continued to surround them, tapping on the windows with long, spindly fingers. When another vehicle approached from the opposite direction, the figures vanished, leaving only deep, claw-like marks in the sand where they had stood. Locals warn against stopping on Route 89, especially at night. The road has a way of disorienting travelers, leading them off course or into areas they don't recognize. Many who've broken down or stopped for a rest report hearing faint whispers in the wind, urging them to move on. Those who ignore the warnings often speak of vivid nightmares afterward, dreams of being trapped in the desert, unable to escape the shifting sands. The stories of Route 89 are difficult to dismiss, even for skeptics. The road's eerie energy, combined with its tragic history and proximity to sacred lands, has cemented its reputation as one of Arizona's most haunted highways. Whether the curse is real or imagined, one thing is certain: Route 89 is not a road to be taken lightly. If you find yourself traveling this lonely stretch of highway, keep your eyes on the horizon and your thoughts respectful. Because on Route 89, the past is never far away, and sometimes it's closer than you think. Road 10, Georgia, the ghost hitchhiker of Highway 166. Highway 166, a quiet stretch of road winding through the rural outskirts of Georgia, feels like a place untouched by time. Its two-lane path weaves through dense woods and rolling hills, with little more than the occasional farmhouse or gas station to break the monotony. But to those who've driven it at night, Highway 166 is more than just a lonely road. It's a place where the past refuses to rest, and where a single decision can lead to an encounter you'll never forget. The legend of Highway 166 revolves around a ghostly hitchhiker, a young woman whose presence has haunted drivers for decades. She's always described the same way, wearing a faded dress that seems slightly out of place, with long, dark hair partially obscuring her face. Drivers report seeing her standing by the roadside, her thumb raised in a silent plea for a ride. But what begins as a simple act of kindness often takes a chilling turn. One of the earliest recorded encounters comes from the 1950s, when a traveling salesman picked up a woman near a wooded stretch of Highway 166. She climbed into the back seat without a word, her head bowed. As he drove, he attempted small talk, asking where she was headed. Her only response was to point further down the road. When they reached a small bridge, she whispered, "This is where I need to get out." The salesman pulled over, but when he turned to speak to her, the back seat was empty. The only sign she'd ever been there was the faint smell of lavender lingering in the air. Over the years, countless similar stories have emerged. A truck driver, traveling through on a foggy night, claimed the woman appeared out of nowhere, standing directly in his headlights. He slammed on the brakes and jumped out to check on her, only to find the road empty. Another driver, a teenager returning home from a party, said the hitchhiker appeared in his rearview mirror after he passed her without stopping. She stared at him silently, her eyes glowing faintly, before disappearing just as he crossed the same bridge. But the hitchhiker isn't the only ghostly presence on Highway 166. Locals speak of a phantom car that appears late at night, its headlights glowing unnaturally bright as it speeds toward oncoming traffic. Drivers who've encountered it describe the car swerving directly at them, forcing them off the road. But when they look back, there's no sign of the vehicle, no taillights, no sound, just an empty stretch of highway. One of the most harrowing tales involves a young couple who decided to explore the highway's legends for themselves. Armed with flashlights and a camera, they parked near the infamous bridge and began walking along the roadside. At first, all they encountered was the oppressive silence of the woods. But as they neared the bridge, they heard footsteps behind them. Turning, they saw the faint outline of the hitchhiker standing just beyond the reach of their flashlight beams. She didn't move, didn't speak. She simply watched. The couple retreated to their car, but as they drove away, they heard a soft tapping on the back window, as though she were asking to be let in. Highway 166 has become a magnet for paranormal investigators and thrill seekers, drawn by the tales of the ghostly hitchhiker and the strange events tied to the road. Some claim to have captured her image on film, an indistinct, shadowy figure standing by the roadside or peering into their car windows. Others have recorded unexplainable audio, faint whispers, soft laughter, and even a voice saying, "Don't leave me here." Skeptics suggest these experiences are the product of overactive imaginations, amplified by the eerie atmosphere of the highway at night. But for those who've encountered the hitchhiker, her presence feels undeniably real. They describe an overwhelming sense of sadness, as if she's searching for something or someone she'll never find. The origins of the hitchhiker remain a mystery. Some believe she was a victim of a car accident decades ago, her spirit forever tied to the road where she died. Others think she's a manifestation of the collective fears and tragedies tied to Highway 166. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: she's still waiting. If you ever find yourself driving down Highway 166 after dark, keep your eyes on the road and the mirrors. And if you see a young woman standing in the shadows, remember, some passengers are better left behind. These 10 highways remind us that the road is more than just a path from one place to another. It's a threshold, a space where the past and present collide. From ghostly hitchhikers to cursed lands, these stories are more than legends. They are warnings. The next time you find yourself driving alone at night, ask yourself, are you truly alone? And if you're not, who or what is sharing the road with you? Which of these haunted highways would you dare to drive? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're ready for more tales of the unexplained, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes on the road.